This is a recording of a talk given at Austin Center for Spiritual Living on the morning of January 13, 2008 by the Reverend Dr. Richard Imprescia. This talk is entitled, Complaining and Your Health.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. As if there's been nothing that has punctuated this process. That song and the enthusiasm and the power of enthusiasm, it goes right along with something that I just picked up this morning out of a book I have, and I retyped it. There was a squeaky tenor had just completed his piece. The applause was less than warm. But one member of the audience was exclaiming, "Extraordinary, wonderful, unbelievable." "Pardon me," said a puzzled man sitting in the next seat. "You astound me. I think I may claim some knowledge of the subject, and I think his voice was terrible." "Voice," said the other man. "I wasn't thinking of his voice. I was praising his nerve." Isn't that great? And that goes right along with what we've been talking about now, or been working with since last week, last Sunday, if you recall. Just to review, I began this series of 4 talks called Stop Complaining and Live Life. And it was really an interesting kind of thing. A couple of things, just to bring you up to date a little bit, and you'll pick it up as we go through here, because it's a theme that's going to carry all the way through. But I gave you a 21-day challenge. And that challenge was to take your bracelet, put it on your wrist, your purple bracelet, and there's some over there on the table. There's a plastic sack there. There were others here disappeared from last week. Maybe they all went. But there's 100 in that bag. Take one. Put it on your wrist if you don't already have one. How many of you have your bracelet on today? Hey, look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Have any of you, this is a rhetorical question, you can nod your heads or you can say something about it. Have any of you noticed any shift in the way you relate to things as a result of this? I find it incredible. At any rate, every time you find yourself complaining, you take it off your wrist and you put it on the other wrist and start all over again. And the what now? It makes your wrist sore. Not if you get good at it. And the objective is to be able to go 21 consecutive days without making a complaint. Now that's complaint, gossiping, griping, moaning, gritching, criticizing, those kinds of annoying behaviors that many people, none of you of course, but many people have done through their lives, and it interferes with so much that your life is all about. Now the idea of 21 days, and this is an old idea that comes from years ago, I first heard it about 40 years ago, that it takes 21 days of continuous direction toward establishing a new way of thinking or a new habit. It takes 21 days to break an old habit and establish a new one. Now, I just read something day before yesterday, I can't remember where I read it right now, that says NASA has done some experiments, behavioral experiments, and found that it takes between 30 and 60 days. And other people have claimed a variety of durations that this is going to take. But folks, if you can make it 21 days, that is a major accomplishment. How many of you made it all week long without a complaint? I am ashamed of you. I was scratching my head. I thought that I put one over on you. No, last Sunday, as you recall, standing here, I was explaining about this, and I exclaimed to all of you my glee. And that was my 4th day. If I'd completed that day, it would have been 4 days. It wasn't 5 minutes later that I made a complaint from the platform. and had to switch my bracelet. And I've been working at this since the 17th of November when I first came across this. It is a wonderful, powerful, incredibly influencing process that will really make a difference in your life. Now, I love the comment that Lily Tomlin made. She said, man invented language to satisfy his deep need to complain. I don't think that we do have an intrinsic deep need, but it's almost as if we do, because almost everybody complains. I won't say everybody, because I've not yet met everybody in the whole world, but it seems to be the tendency for most people, doesn't it, to complain. I went and I looked up the definition of complain. I have a little online dictionary. I press a little button on my mouse and up comes this thing called a dashboard, and I can plug in any word. It's wonderful. And it says this: to complain is to express dissatisfaction or annoyance, I'll get it straight, of anything you want to call it, person, place, thing, event. To express dissatisfaction or annoyance. And in my Webster's dictionary, it says it's to express grief, pain, or discontent. Now, that defines complaining pretty well, I think. And my question to you is, how much do you really complain? Did you learn anything about yourself, those of you that have the bracelets on, about the level of your complaints or how much you complain? For those of you that are participating in this program, were some of you surprised at how much you actually complain? I'm not pointing the finger out at any of you, because if I were to do that and make critical comments, I would be complaining and I'd have to switch my bracelet. I'm just saying, is it helping you to stay a little bit more awake? Have you discovered how much easier your life tends to work when you're not gritching, griping, moaning, and complaining, gossiping, and criticizing about things? So we stand back and we take a look at this. What's the payoff? We know what a complaint is. We've just defined it. But what's the payoff? You see, there's got to be a reason. There has to be some kind of a perceived benefit for us complaining. And I looked at this and thought about it, and the book, which is a wonderful book, and I recommend that you get it. It's inspiring, and it's on sale for a really good price. It's normally a $17 book, and you can get one for $12 over here. And you know, your bookstore is not making much from that. But what are some of the perceived benefits that we get from complaining? Number one, we can get people to sympathize with us, and that always makes us feel good, doesn't it? Also, it makes us perpetuate the same state of emotional state. Number two, if we can put down people, that's criticizing. If we put down somebody else, that might be a means by which we can build ourselves up, isn't it? Or complaining can help us to avoid the responsibilities that we have in life. And it's always nice to not have to live up to what we commit ourselves to. I'm not sure it's really nice, but a lot of people try that. Complaining helps us to justify our shortcomings. It helps us to get attention, and many people need attention all the time. Complaining helps us to boost our self-confidence. If we can complain enough about something, we may be able to actually shrug it off. Now, I'm not saying that all complaints are bad. There are some complaints that actually stimulate you to take a very careful look at something, your relationship, your interaction with life, that gave rise to that complaint and move you to action to do something. But most complaints, or a lot of complaining, at least in my life, has been those kinds of things that come up, and I just have to say something about them that are not useful to me and not useful for the interaction. And there's one of these payoffs that I just mentioned to you here. Complaining, in general, doesn't work toward helping you produce a life that works. What happens when we complain? When we complain, we literally are shifting our attention. We are redirecting our attention from where we are, where we're going, what we want, to what we don't want, what we don't like. And you remember we've talked over and over and over right here on Sunday mornings. One of the basic themes of this teaching is that there's a power in the universe within which we live, move, and have our being. We call that the power of God. It is an aspect of God, which is the active, creative, manifesting something. And that power flows directly to the focus of our attention. And what happens when you are complaining? When you are complaining about your next door neighbor, what you are doing is giving power to whatever it is that gave rise to the complaint about your next door neighbor, or your wife, or your husband, or your mate, or your partner, or whomever. All you're doing is reinforcing that. It's redirecting the power of the universe to flow to the focus of your attention, and the power of your intention, another way of putting it, goes right to your attention. Sometimes we orchestrate a scenario, we orchestrate a kind of a situation in order to be able to create a context for complaint. I mean, we do this deliberately, sometimes very consciously. Let me give you an example. A number of years ago, quite a number of years ago, it has to be almost 30 years ago, a year or two after I got into the ministry, I was over in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was my first ministry. And it was going very, very well. We did a lot of good things in Tulsa. But there were others around me in the movement, in California and St. Louis and other places, were doing better than I was doing. And I needed to be doing as well as they were. And I knew why I couldn't do any better than what I was doing. It was because of all of them. Not those other ministers or churches, but all of them in the congregation. Well, one of the people that was doing very, very well, one of the ministers was out in Huntington Beach, California. This was Peggy Bassett. Those of you that have been around religious science very long remember Peggy Bassett. She's gone now. She and I became pretty close friends. And I decided to call her because she was having extraordinary success in her ministry. And mine was growing and doing okay. I called Peggy to talk to her about what she was doing. I really didn't call her to talk to her about what the good things were that she was doing and what I could learn from her. I called her to gripe, to complain about why things weren't going well for me. So we started the conversation and she began sharing, and she shared so much. She was so gracious. She was so giving, so accommodating. And then I finally got to the point that I wanted to get to, and that was to start gritching and gritching, by the way, that's a euphemism, about some of these people on my board and in the other power positions in our church. It wasn't 2 minutes till she picked up on what I was doing, said a thing or two, terminated the conversation, hung up, and I was sitting there holding the headset in my hand. Now, what happened? And then I realized she wasn't going to listen to that stuff. And I got to know her pretty well because over the years we worked very closely together. I became very influential, prominent, I guess, in the United Church of Religious Science. I was the chairman of the International Board of Trustees, which is the highest position in the church, and she was the president. She actually reported to me as the president. And I got to know her and I got to watching her. Peggy did not have time for complaining, griping, and moaning and groaning, at least at that particular stage of her ministry. And her ministry grew fabulously. I was looking at what I didn't want, what I didn't like. Peggy was continually looking at where she was going, what she was doing, and what were the means by which she could express this vision that was working within her and within her church. That's the difference. How often we get distracted. We redirect our attention. to that which is not useful. Now this morning, the theme of this morning's talk or sermon is complaining in your health. But I think you can see how this works. But let's become just a little bit more specific. How often do we distract ourselves from the perfect health that we are seeking and the perfect health that we know is a possibility for every one of us? You know, we're made in the image and likeness of God. We are one with all that is. We are one with God. That there's an unlimited field of opportunities and possibilities within which we live, move, and have our being, and we can tap into that. And we can idealize, but it is the reality that we can achieve greater health than we ever experienced before. I think one of the reasons that we don't is that we continually distract ourselves. And one of the most critical ways we distract ourselves is through our complaining. I want to read something to you that's in this little book, Complaint-Free World by Will Bowen. And this is by a psychologist by the name of, he quotes Robin Kowalski, who's written an awful lot. As a matter of fact, I dug something up on her just to have the title. Did I bring it with me? Oh yeah, here's a little article that was printed in the Yale University Press in a book she wrote called Complaining, Teasing, and Other Annoying Behaviors. Anyway, he quotes her. Will Bowen quotes her, where she says that many complaints involve attempts to elicit particular interpersonal reactions from others, such as sympathy or approval. For example, people may complain about their health, not because they actually feel sick, but because the sick role, the role that they assume, allows them to achieve secondary gains, such as sympathy from others, or the avoidance of things they don't want to do. Some of you may be able to relate to that in a little way. What happens in this kind of an interaction where we assume a role of being ill is that we are actually reinforcing a particular behavior. And if you play like you're sick, very often you're going to find that you are going to get sick and you're going to perpetuate that illness. And the next thing you know, that illness is going to progress. Have you ever done anything like that? And health is one of the big complaints that most people have. Have you ever made yourself sick by complaining about your health? Complaining, griping, moaning, groaning, lamenting about your health. It can actually make you sick. Now, the flip side of this is where you feign an illness and you actually find yourself getting ill in the process, which I've already mentioned. Now, think about this. I remember when I was a kid, I was about 9 or 10 years old, we lived right across the street from the schoolyard. So all I had to do to get to school on Sunday mornings, on weekday mornings, was to get up and walk across the street and go to school. And I didn't want to do it one morning. And I told my mother, "Ma, I'm sick. I'm not feeling well. I didn't want to go to school today. Can I stay home?" She says, "Well," she took my temperature and she says, "Okay, maybe you can just rest today and see how it goes." Do you know something? By the end of the day, I was feeling ill. And about 3 o'clock when school let out, one of my friends came over and I was really sick. And he says, "Hey, you know, they've opened that gate where we can get up on the hill now. I was going up there. You want to go?" Like that. I was well. Have any of you done that? But how much do we miss out on life by using those kinds of gimmicks to redirect ourselves to something that is not useful to us? And you say, "Well, that's really never happened to me." You remember when you were a teenager and you first began to date? and you might have felt really poorly, and you were home lamenting your situation, and then the telephone call comes in, and that date that you had been looking for came through immediately. This magnificent, wonderful transformation, and you were ready to go. We have tremendous power in our hands, in our minds. It's incredible. You see, and this little bracelet, as powerful as this can be in helping to redirect your attention, there's a whole lot more to it. What we are doing is beginning to constantly challenge our thought, our awareness, if you will, to be able to recognize when we are off track. That's all this is. It doesn't have to do with just attaining 21 days of complaint-free experience. It's more than that. It's developing an awareness that says, I am awake enough to see what I am doing in my life, and I know what works and what doesn't work. Complaining doesn't work, but there's a whole lot of other things that don't work either in our lives. Now, there's a complementary practice that I want to bring up this morning. You remember about a year ago at this time, that movie, The Secret, that became so very, very popular? And it still is, as a matter of fact. People have groups going all over the country. We showed the film one evening. We got a space over here. I can't even remember where it was, not too far from here. And we had a whole bunch of people show up for it. We discussed it. I did a class called The 5 Gifts for an Abundant Life, the basis of The Secret, and we had about 40 people in that class. I mean, it was really a marvelous thing. When I first watched it, one of the things that impacted me more than anything else, that movie, The Secret, and also the various interviews that Michael Beckwith and what's his name, John Azaroff, and other people that were so prominently involved in all that was going on. One of the things that kept coming up was the idea of the, what was it called? The rock. The gratitude rock. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Well, gratitude was that element that kept being thrown at us. It's probably the most important concept that came out of The Secret. The Secret is the law of attraction. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. Or, as Michael Beckwith put it, ask, believe, receive. Nothing new in any of that. But the emphasis on gratitude, being grateful for what you have. When you are grateful, how can you possibly complain? When you are complaining, how can you possibly be grateful? They don't work together. But what we have here is a complementary process. The gratitude rock. You remember that one little scenario in the movie? There was this fella who was over in South Africa, and he met one of the locals there who was having some problems in his family, and his son was very ill, and he got this idea, well, why don't you give why don't you give thanks for the things that you really want? And then he came up with the idea of a gratitude rock. And he gave him a rock, and he says, put this in your pocket, and every time that you pull it out or feel it or see it, give thanks for something that happened in your life. Give thanks for all the good that is yours. And he did. And the son got well. And it took hold. Amanda Fainer, who's not here this morning, she ended up on the Oprah program because she was so impressed by The Secret that she wrote a letter to the Oprah people, and they invited her. She wrote the letter on a Friday email on a Friday afternoon, and she was in the studio in Chicago being taped on Wednesday, and she showed up here one Sunday morning with a whole bunch of these rocks. Said, any of you want a gratitude rock? And of course, I got mine first, and I've been carrying it around with me. So every time I reach in my pocket, I feel that. It's a time to pause for just a moment. A short pause and say, thank you, God, for all the good that I have. Thank you for my wonderful children or child. Thank you for this great relationship. Thank you for this good job. Whatever, anything that comes to mind. But it's so great because it's always there to remind you. When you are grateful, you are not complaining. And when you are complaining, reach in your pocket or your purse and pull out your gratitude rock. Just to remind you that you have so much to be grateful for and you don't have time for complaints. Now that's the process, folks. Next week we're going to talk about gratitude and relationships. But I'm going to tell you some of the same kind of things, maybe in a few different words. But I do want to go over a couple of things before wrapping it up this morning. There's some spin-off from this process of non-complaining and gratitude. Because after a while you're going to find some wonderful things that are happening in your life. That's the great spin-off. You're also going to find that there may be some painful things that happen. The wonderful things occur as a result of the development of a consciousness of receptivity to the good of life. The opening of your awareness to be able to see things not through a fog of complaint and gossip and criticism and grumpiness, but to see things as they are. And life is wonderful. It's all there for you. That's the wonderful spin-off from entering into a program like this. The painful part of this is you may very well find that there are some people that just drift right out of your life. They disappear from your life because it may well be that you had a friendship that was based on complaint or griping or moaning or gossip or whatever. You ever watch that series on television, Sex and the City? Now you don't need to admit to that if whatever. Well, I like to watch it. I've never watched it all the way through a full program. But I never watched it when I'm watching only the reruns and they come on late at night. But what I like about it is this is a study in psychology. Kind of abnormal psychology, I think. Or maybe it's not so abnormal. But what I'm pointing out is here is this coffee klatch, this group of women, and they get together. Invariably, they get together to do what? Complain. They're complaining about their relationships, about their kids, about the whatever. And there's one in there whose name I don't remember, who seems to be the most normal of the group. You remember her? She's dark-haired, pretty. Well, they're all pretty. And she seems to be reasonably happily married, life going along pretty. And they're always on her case. And that's what happens in life. This is a relationship, this group relationship that is based in complaint or griping and moaning. You don't need that. You don't need to be in a relationship where if you don't have something to complain about, there's nothing to talk about. So stop complaining. Give thanks and start living. That's the message for this morning. And we will continue this next week in a little different way. But before we go on with the rest of the program this morning, which is not much, I want to renew the invitation to those of you who have not yet gotten a bracelet and begun the process. So pick up a bracelet. There's a plastic sack over there. I'm not sure it's even been opened, but you can tear open the side and take a bracelet for yourself. You may also want to take one for your spouse or your partner or a friend or a colleague that you think you would like to. What was that? Oh, okay. Take one of those. They're free. They're free. You might want to put an extra $1 in the collection. I don't mean to cause you to increase your offering for this morning. I guess yes, I do. But because we do have to pay for them, but they're free from us, okay? Put put the bracelet on, and every time you find yourself complaining, and some of you say, but some of my complaints are legitimate. Some of them are good. And maybe there are. But you know, you're not going to have to justify it to me or anybody else. You know when the way you are complaining is supporting something that's going to move you forward in life, or just more gritching, griping, and moaning. Okay? And you find yourself complaining, switch to the other wrist. If you happen to be around other people that are wearing their purple bracelet, and you hear them complaining, perfectly okay to go over them and say, hey, I caught you complaining. They need to switch their bracelet. But so do you. Because you're complaining about their complaining, okay? And the books are available over there. Get your bracelet over there. The money, we should have a basket. If somebody can find a basket, just put your $12 in the basket. Remember, the book is $12, and that'll end up at the bookstore. And one last thing. If we run out of books, if there are not enough books for you, then we're ordering more, all right? But you may want to, and I was going to make up a sheet where you could sign the sheet. Write your name on a slip of paper and put it on the table. Save book for me, and then put your name, and we'll know, that we'll reserve a book for you. After the service, we're going to have a short gathering where we can have some feedback and catch up. This might be good for those of you that want to get started with this. It'll be right down here. We'll put a little circle of chairs, as we did last week when we got this started. And so you might choose to join us for that. It'll only be for a few minutes, maybe up to a half hour, something of that sort. Let's, what do we do at this time? Pray. We pray. So let's pray. Quiet ourselves. Take a deep breath, and as you breathe in, imagine that you are breathing in the very essence of life, which of course you are, because life is in everything. And the life-givingness of the air we breathe reminds us of the life-givingness of Spirit itself. And know these words to be your words of truth. I am a life-giving Spirit made in the image and likeness of God. And everywhere I look, I see the face of God. Everything I do, I see the activity of God working in and through me. Everyone I perceive, I know is an expression of God. Everything is God expressing. I rest in this awareness for a few moments, knowing that out of that, there is revealed to me everything that I need to know, to do, to be, to acquire, to fulfill myself according to the destiny of my soul. Ernest Holmes makes the comment that all we have to do to express our divine destiny is to know who we are. You know who you are. You are a God child made in the image and likeness of that which made all that is. Take that idea, embrace it, embody it, hold it in mind, remind yourself of it often, and allow your good to show up for you. Then make the choice to do what you need to do to experience it all. Father, Mother, loving God, I truly give thanks for the realization of the truth of these words. I rejoice that it is so. I know that it is so. I accept that it is so. And so it is.